It's time to rethink your board. But how? Do you need influential execs or subject matter experts? Or even robots? Yeah, that's a thing. But can you get board insurance for a bot? Our guest, Helle Bank Jorgensen, studies boards of directors intensely. As the CEO of Competent Boards, she shares in this episode how and why organizations need to take a fresh look at their board directors now to be ready for tomorrow. At the Innovative Leadership Institute, we help leaders be future ready, including how to forge fresh perspectives. Learn more on our website at innovativeleadership.com.
This is Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf, founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute, where we help leaders be future ready. Today, Helle Bank Jorgensen, CEO of Competent Boards and #1 Amazon best-selling author, is helping us on that mission. We'll be focusing on her experience at Davos 2025 and also talking about her upcoming book, The Future Boardroom, How to Transform in Turbulent Times. Welcome, Helle.
Well, thank you so much, Maureen, for having me and these exciting topics.
You attended Davos and you presented as well, correct?
A few times, yes. I've had a busy schedule running from one thing to another. I was late for my own reception with the Competent Board because I had to run from another session. So yes, I've had many good conversations, but also a response on what I was saying.
What were you talking about and what responses did you get?
One of the things I focused on was, what's the narrative? I gave away the CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer Awards. That was Monday, the same day as I was late for my own reception because I was at another event. Perhaps to give you a little bit of feeling of Davos, it's this relatively small place, small city, where for a week you have people coming in from all over the world. And it's mostly leaders coming in from big businesses, countries, etc., and transforming that little city for that whole week. So you walk from one place to another. There's, of course, the World Economic Forum events, but there's a lot of other events around it. To give you a little bit of feeling of what I saw, heard, but also, as you say, what was the response to some of the things I was saying, it was that we are in a fragmented world. If we looked at the different sessions, some were very much focused on AI. A lot had AI as a part of it. Some focused on trust, some I participated in terms of circularity, in terms of nature, beyond GDP, etc. But you, of course, had a lot of other sessions that not even touch upon sustainability, not even touched upon climate change that seemed for some to be like, well, that was last year's boss. We saw also in the yearly risk report that, again, those green risk in terms of pollution and climate, etc., well, they are huge risk in 10 years. But we keep kind of like moving that while misinformation, disinformation clearly took the top. And I agree on that. And that was, again, some of the response. When I'm talking about the narrative, I'm talking about trust. I'm talking about leadership. And there's clearly almost a lack of trust. There is, I would say, a lack of real leadership. A lot of people were talking about, are we in a T0 world where who is actually the leaders of this world? Is it the BRICS countries? So a lot of fragmented thoughts that I believe we are all digesting at the moment. And I think we are all in a situation where we are listening to our own news and not necessarily what's happening in the rest of the world. And that is one of the beauty of Davos, is that suddenly you realize what's happening in Asia, what's happening in India, what's happening in Latin America, what's happening around the world. What are the reaction to perhaps the things that you and I right now being North America that we're seeing every single day might not be the same reaction somewhere else. And for me, I think it's important that we have those global partnerships, that we listen to each other and understand what are the values, but also the value of what it is that people really value, both the leaders that's in Davos, but everyone around this globe. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, but narrative was one of the things I talked about. I talked about that we need to have not only short-term leadership, but long-term leadership, because whoever want to go out and talk to Mother Nature and tell Mother Nature that we have decided that we don't have a crisis and climate change is not happening, be my guest. I would be very happy if Mother Nature stopped sending us invoices. But so far, she doesn't seem to understand Danish. She doesn't seem to understand English. I think she only understands us taking good care of her. Seems like she's not that happy with us at the moment.
One of the things you said struck that each of us are embedded in our own countries and our own news and our own challenges or opportunities, all of the above. Where are the forums that we come together to change our own small narrative into a larger narrative? The Competent Board's graduate group gets together and the group do presentations, and there's a safe place to share and explore and expand. That kind of community is and will become even more crucial in this environment that is seemingly more fractured by the day.
A week ago, we had our global forum. And yes, you'll get people with us from New Zealand, from Australia, Hong Kong, China, India, Singapore, Africa, South Africa, Europe, Latin America, North America. So yeah, you have all continents. And you get the information right there where they are right now. And I think, yes, you're right. That's where you get that safe space and get an understanding. Yes, you're right. We should have many more people that are getting the value of those connections.
The invitation for people to seek out those multinational, multicultural opportunities, because it is so easy in both a fractured world and busier lives. It's so easy to get sucked into the chaos that we're experiencing right now. People from around the world are experiencing their own variations of lack of certainty creates risk and creates a lot of activity to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of people that are reacting instead of responding and instead of looking into the future. And yes, for those that are listening to us and say, oh, I did not know that something like that existed, can I join? Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm sharing a lot on LinkedIn. I really think it's getting more and more important to have those safe fora where you can understand what's going on and listen also to other points of view. Because unfortunately, there's a lot that's speaking in echo chambers and the air there might be thinner and thinner. So let's get some oxygen.
That addresses also the World Economic Forum risk report and the mis and disinformation. Having one-on-one or group conversations with folks experiencing a different perspective in the world.
Totally right. And that's one of my takeaways. You just remind me here when we talked about trust. The Edelman Trust Barometer is another thing that comes out every year. And I have the pleasure of joining every year for the morning briefing on that. And I always enjoy those sessions. One of my aha moment this year were when we talked about also the younger generation. And hey, I have my own daughter, so I should know. But it's very clear that young people nowadays, from what Edelman looked into, they start by reading the headline. And then they go to reading the comments before they decide if they want to read the article. So having all of those comments on like, oh, is this worth my time? Should I read this? One part of me is like, wow, that means, yeah, you're getting different opinions there. But it also might be that there are a lot of bots putting in a comment underneath. And therefore, what can we trust and not trust? So critical thinking is a key part. The other thing that came out was in terms of young people trust their phone and AI more than their own doctor. And hey, you can see it. You have information from the whole world on your computer and your doctor say it's ABC, but you have researched ahead of time and you have all of that information. But again, we are talking about a different society where who's trusted, who's not trusted. School teachers, is the thing you're teaching me correct? Or is what I find on my device correct? And again, who are putting the information into the device? What is the algorithm behind that? So to me, AI governance is starting to get really, really, really high on that list. And I fear that if companies that don't start looking at the AI governance really will have risk ahead of them. So yeah, there's a lot of things in terms of trust.
It's interesting about school teachers because here in the U.S., as we're facing an administration that is reaching in more heavily to education and dictating what should and shouldn't be taught, is my AI counterpart giving me more comprehensive information than my school system? Who should I trust? Who is accurate? I understand AI governance and back to critical decision making.
Yeah.
How do we teach our, I would say, young people, but also adults?
All of us. Hey, you know more about AI and you know, the other Maureen I talk to from time to time. And how can we teach others, but also ourselves, that critical thinking? Asking the question, is this correct? Is this not correct? I have to admit there are some of these things that are coming out lately. I'm like, that must be fake news. And then I realized, no, it was not fake news. But how do we navigate? And also, what does this mean for the global business playbook? Because you have the algorithms, you have all of this news, you have all of the bots, clearly with more and more power to different Gen AI systems. When you start to have more power behind that, where we kind of like go exponential, there's just going to be more and more. And how do we navigate in that? It's huge opportunities. There's no doubt. It sounds very negative. There are so many opportunities. But are we going to let us be in charge as humans and have a co-pilot, or are we going to let someone else be in charge of our decisions? And I think we really need to have that conversation in the boardroom, in the companies, around the kitchen table with our kids right now.
In a boardroom and in an executive suite, what questions should we be asking about the role of AI and AI governance? Because to your point, it will accelerate basic productivity. In my field of consulting, I use it a lot. My clients get a lot more and better results for less money because I'm more productive. But we also assume I am being very critical and discerning about what I share. I don't just run ChatGPT or Copilot and hand it over without discernment. Otherwise, I am useless. And in fact, I'm dangerous because my clients expect a level of discernment. But what does that conversation look like in a boardroom and an executive suite?
Some of the questions I ask is like, are you ensuring AI is used responsibly in your business? So what are the questions we are asking to management? Do they know? What do they know? What are the guidelines in that? Do we have a strategy for protecting against deep fakes, cyber threats? You can't fully protect yourself, but how are we reacting? How are we responding? How are we being proactive?
How are we training?
Exactly. And that goes to, do we have that critical thinking muscle? Are we training the critical thinking muscle? Or are we just using, as you were just pointing, our favorite AI bot to develop the answers that we trust? That's the danger. And then, of course, with all of this comes energy security, data security, ethics, governance. And clearly in a world right now where our data centers use more and more energy because we're all using AI in different ways, what does that also look like in the future? Okay, now you have from the new
DeepSeek,
right, where you're using actually much less energy. So maybe we are not in a situation where we need as much energy to power our AI. But what does that mean? So you want to have data security. You also want to have energy security. If you're trusting AI to tell you how to operate on a patient, well, the hospital probably will have a generator should power go out. But what happens if the AI system blacks out and you're in the middle of an operation? Can we then go back to, we trust the doctor to actually do what needs to be done? Or have we at that point been so Well, we just look at what it is that AI tells us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at it in all different industries. Look at lawyers. There's so much that you now have AI to help you with. But who is training the new Marine? If you're kind of like looking at the partners in law firm, for example, now do they need all of these young people that normally had been trained to do all of the different things? Well, perhaps not as much. At least if we do it, it's a bigger cost. But what happens in X number of years where partner X decides to retire? Do we then have number 2 to take over? Or are we now relying on only AI systems that perhaps do not have that critical thinking? So I just want boardrooms, I want leaders to think a step or two ahead and saying, what are the consequences of what we are doing right now? And do we have that security, being that energy security, data security, the ethics, all of those things in place, the governance, so we can continue be a trusted business or trusted person?
I'd add one to that, and that's water security.
Oh, yeah. We can find a lot of these things like critical mineral security, water security, fresh air security.
Yeah.
You can look at a lot of different, what is it that we need? And how do we steward that? To go back to my first book, Stewards of the Future.
And it seems a fundamental question now as we look at the defocusing on DE&I and sustainability. We passed the 1.5 degrees Celsius this year. What does that mean?
Yeah, and you can, of course, say if you go not that many years back, we are living different lives now than our parents, etc. So you're always seeing, well, there's changes. But yeah, you are looking into more weather-related events. Just ask the insurance companies, right? It's happening around us, unfortunately, all the time. And we need to adapt and at the same time need to mitigate. As one person now, many years back, said to me, it's a question about suffering. You can pay now and suffer a little bit now, or you can pay with interest rate much later and suffer much more. And I think we as humanity might have been waiting a little bit too long. So we are paying, and we all paying right now. I put out another LinkedIn article because I was thinking about this Shell scenario 2025. Back in 2005, Shell doing these fantastic scenarios. I've been doing it for a long time. And they sent out these scenarios 2025, and it had 3 different worlds looking into. And one was very prosperity, and we all live together. And I think it was called Open Doors, cooperation, transparency, sustainability, the world we want, if you could put it like that. Then you had a low trust, globalization, fragmented, compliance-heavy world where trust is scarce and risk dominates. And then you had the last scenario called FLAX, future of nationalistic self-interest, regulatory fragmentation, and climate inaction. In that scenario, it's also that you're breaking up, and we're seeing other things that's happening. And I looked at the scenarios back then, and my honest comment was, oh, why are we not talking about Africa and the demographics in Africa? There will be more young people. Even at that point, I was seeing that could be, but it was kind of like, that was my reaction. I would never in my life have thought that we were sleepwalking into this situation we are in today. But yeah, here we are. We are in a situation where it's not collaboration, it's different kind of world. But unfortunately, as we talked about before, one player we really haven't gotten on our team in any way, and that is Mother Nature. And she's stronger than the most of us.
And one of the things I remember from the Future of Jobs report was climate refugees, that we are facing migration. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and we're seeing businesses relocate here in part because of stability of energy, stability of water, fewer hurricanes, no forest fires, just a place that is safer to locate a business than several other states.
That's exactly it. That also goes when we start talking about energy and energy security. We need to look not 2 years ahead, but 10, 15, 20, 50 years ahead. Where do we have water? If we start talking about different energy, nuclear, we need some water, right? Where do we have water? Where do we have too much water? So it's underwater. Where do we need it at all? Because there are no people living in those places because it's too warm or flooded, or it's just so many questions that needs to be looked at now so we can plan instead of waiting to see what's going to happen. We need to have those scenarios. We need to think long term. And that's getting to mention my upcoming book, The Future Boardroom, and how to transform in turbulent times. We're definitely living in turbulent times. We all know that. We are in a situation where the boardroom 24/7 have to look at how we're going to not react, but respond, proactively discuss. So when I wrote The Future Boardroom, I was very much looking at all of these transformations that's happening around the world. What about the boardroom? How can we get to a boardroom that are also transforming to the boardroom of the future? What will it take in terms of committees? What will it take of the chair? What are discussions that we need to have around the boardroom table? Should it be around the boardroom table? People that say, well, do we need board directors at all? I'm going like, yes, this is the fiduciary duty. This is the oversight, especially at a time where we also have CEOs that are not staying on as long as they used to. So the board or directors are the only real long-term governance. And if we don't have competent board that have the right qualities, how can we expect them to make the right decisions on what should this company look like in the future? How do we transform the company? So in terms of the book, I'm very eager. I'm getting a lot of very, very good advanced praises for the book. Some saying it's better than Stewards of the Future.
Which is hard to believe.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm really sure if you should criticizing my other child, but
no. It's that the other one was so good, it's hard to top it. How's that? As I think about just things I read this morning, that there's a lawsuit against the board of Target for their prior DEI policies and how they didn't appropriately represent the risk. And yet reading something else from the World Economic Forum talking about the business benefit, bottom line value to good DE&I practices. So we've got strong research, and yet we've got activist boards. Even if these suits are completely crap, they're still taking the attention of board members away from governing the company.
I was actually asked by a media outlet in terms of this, and I'm happy to share. We have 3 different reactions. The first reaction from companies where the boards have not had the time or taken the time to actually discuss the big why. Why are we doing this in the first place? What is the best benefit of it? Do we get more innovation? Do we attract better people, et cetera, that are saying, okay, let's just get rid of the DEI. I think, yes, they should get rid of their DEI because clearly it's not been something that's been discussed. It's clearly more PR exercise that have been going on. And yes, that's a waste of shareholder money if it's not something that's really been embedded into why is this good for the business. Then you have group number 2, group of companies that definitely have seen the benefit of innovation, thinking differently, attracting the best people, understanding the customers, understanding the markets that they're going into, culture that look at things in a way where, okay, we need to be agile, we need to be ready to transform, get the different ideas in. As you and I was talking about before, if you're breathing your own air all the time, it's going to be a little bit harder to get to the next step. That group I see large. Those are also the ones that say, you know what, we'll not talk about it. We'll just keep doing. This is just sound business practice. We'll just keep doing it. And then you have the last group where, of course, the boardroom discussed this. Of course, the executives discussed what is good for this business, what is the right measures for this business. Of course, they understood that having diverse minds are the only way to get innovation, the only way to find the best cost reductions, the only way to get to the better products, the only way to understand your customers, only way to attract. And I can continue. And they have been smart enough to also be able to communicate this to both the shareholders and other stakeholders and see all the benefits. And of course, they will continue to do it. And yes, you can push them, but it's the same thing as you're pushing companies to don't do training of the pilots, right? Well, who of us would go and fly with an airline that says we're not training our pilots because that's a cost? None of us would, right?
Yeah.
So I see, yes, unfortunately, we're having so much time, so much effort, so much pain, so much money being wasted on all of this debate instead of saying, what is sound business practice? Like everything, hey, I've been in this for so long. I remember corporate social responsibility was criticized. Other things was criticized. Health and safety. Why do we really need health and safety? Because that's what people that invest in your company, both in terms of time and money and as a customer, are looking for. And yes, you have had companies that I totally agree have been misusing shareholder money because they have done it as a PR exercise and not as a business strategic imperative.
Thank you. So let's talk more about your book.
Some of the questions I ask in the book would be, what will be the purpose of the board of the future? Who should be around that boardroom table? And what skills should they have? How many should we have around that boardroom table? What will shareholders, employees, suppliers, customers, society expect of the board? And how is the board supposed to deal with the expectations? Just back to what you and I just talked about. There are so many different expectations right now. Unless that boardroom and the executives have really discussed the issues, they're just going to be like, oh, let's go to one side and to the other, right? And instead of, this is what we do. This is the purpose of the business. This is how we are selling our products. This is our business case. This is our business. Shareholders are paying board directors and executives to lead that company to be the best company it can be and give them the best return on their investment. Employees are joining companies where they expect that they can get the best return on their investment, which is their time and their money. So you just have all of this. And clearly the insurance industry at the moment, I see really looking at companies and what kind of companies can we insure? Where are they in the world? What's the future? And then I also discuss how should board members use their influence within their company and in society at large. I believe that we as board directors have a responsibility of leaving the company better than when we found it. I think we have a responsibility of leaving the society that business is part of and give that company air better than we found it, because otherwise we are not leaving the company better. And then I'm talking about how should we harness the potential of evolving technologies like artificial intelligence that you and I talked about, and how can boards work better? I have interviewed also for this book a lot of amazing leaders from all over the world discussing how do they see the future boardroom? How can we work better as directors? What's the role of the chair? Some are saying that we're going from the time where we elected board members based on how famous they were to then what are the skills, very specific, to then, no, we need people that really have that critical thinking. But we don't want people that are sitting and competing with the person next to and saying, look, what I'm saying is smarter than what you're saying. Because we are a team. We need to have that boardroom work together and also together with the leadership. And that's a big part of the book on very good ideas, very good examples from amazing people from around the world who contributed to the book. Corporations have tremendous power to improve the world in ways that governments cannot. If boards equip themselves to deal with these turbulent times, they can play a role in making the world a better place for themselves for their kids, as you talked about before, for their family, for the society, and frankly, for all of us. Those board members that embrace the future boardroom will be the ones that we all will look up to and cherish. They will also be the one that leads the companies of the future.
I want to just amplify a point you just made. Global companies, many of them are bigger than nations. They're bigger in revenue, number of employees, and impact. We are living in a time where governments can set policy, but global companies are deciding where to invest. They're deciding how to invest. So if a country enacts a policy that is inconsistent with the company's values, how do we shift production and how do we stay the course on the values that we hold true? The importance of the boardroom now in times of a fragmented world is just higher.
Totally agree. And I'm actually discussing that in the book. But I also think it's changing a lot from a time where it was, okay, this is our values, this is how we do business. Everyone needs to do that, to really understand what are also the local context. To have a global localization, local globalization, you need to start looking also at your businesses and your local markets in a different way. That puts even more on the boardroom to understand and to have the right people and to put boots on the ground and understand what is really happening. I don't see that people will be only having their boardroom meetings in the boardroom. Well, maybe we will be making a little in the book in terms of how are we going to have robots around the boardroom? Are we going to just have a bot that is basically we can sit and discuss with all the time and not having discussions individually? I don't hope that that is going to be the future, because then it's the bot making the decisions and not us. And at the end of the day, to do in insurance, I'm not sure if a bot can have an insurance policy, perhaps, but it will be hard to put a bot in a prison, perhaps, right? So there are lots of things to dive into. And as I did in Stewards of the Future, I end each chapter with 10 questions for people to, board directors and others, to reflect on and say, maybe we should think about this and evaluate what are we doing and what could we do better.
Helle, when does your book come out?
So we're probably looking at May for some of that, but I think we will have the ebook and the audiobook ahead of that time. It can be pre-ordered right now on Amazon. So please go and find The Future Boardroom, How to Transform in Turbulent Times, and pre-order. All in your bookstore. They're also in bookstores.
Okay. And where would people find out more about you, about Competent Boards, and about your book?
On www.competentboards.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can also find me on LinkedIn, Helle Bank Jorgensen.
To our listeners, thank you for continually engaging in these conversations and using what you are learning to become future-ready leaders, leaders who will demonstrate critical thinking and move us into a better future scenario. Thank you, Helle.
Well, thank you so much. As always, I enjoy these conversations.